The Mississippi River of Betrayal, Part 2, Blood in the Water. The Mississippi churned black as pitch under a moonless sky as gunsmith McCoy stood at the Belle of the West's rail, his weathered hands gripping wood worn smooth by countless other desperate souls. Behind him, Sarah's betrayal festered like a bullet wound, and ahead lay a horizon dark with promise of violence. He hadn't counted on Billy the Butcher's reach extending into the riverboat's crew. The first sign came when Jake found the ship's pilot dead, sprawled across his wheel with a playing card, the ace of spades, pinned to his chest with a brass-handled knife. Billy's calling card. "They're boxing us in," Jake muttered, his eyes scanning the shoreline where shadows seemed to move with purpose. River pirates to the east, Billy's boys to the west, and that storm brewing ahead looks mean enough to sink us. Gunsmith's reply was cut short by the crack of rifle fire. A bullet splintered the rail inches from his hand, and the night erupted into chaos. Billy's men had positioned themselves on both banks, their muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like fireflies. Sarah emerged from below deck, a Winchester in her hands and tears cutting clean tracks through the dirt on her face. "John, I can explain everything dash." "Save it," Gunsmith snarled, shoving her behind a crate as more bullets whizzed past. "You can tell it to the judge if we survive this night." But survival seemed increasingly unlikely as the Belle of the West drifted into the heart of the storm. Lightning revealed Billy's main force on a parallel course. They'd commandeered the River Queen, a faster boat that was quickly gaining ground. The truth of Sarah's betrayal spilled out between volleys of gunfire. She'd been Billy's lover years ago, before he'd murdered her family and left her for dead. She'd orchestrated the frame-up not to trap Gunsmith, but to lure Billy into the open. Her revenge had been years in the planning, but she hadn't counted on falling in love with her mark. "I never meant for innocent people to die," she shouted over the storm's fury. "Billy forced my hand when he started killing townspeople." A massive explosion rocked the Belle as Billy's men landed their first direct hit. Water rushed into the lower deck, and the boat began listing dangerously to port. Jake appeared with grim news: they'd lost the engine room to flooding. "Time to make our stand," Gunsmith declared, checking his revolvers one last time. In the distance, the River Queen was pulling alongside, Billy's scarred face visible in the lightning flashes, his signature butcher's cleaver gleaming wet in the rain. The battle that followed would be spoken of in whispers along the river for years to come. Gunsmith and Jake held the port side while Sarah proved her worth with the Winchester, picking off Billy's men as they attempted to board. But they were outnumbered 5-1, and slowly the tide turned. Jake fell first, taking 3 of Billy's men with him before a shotgun blast caught him full in the chest. His last words were drowned by thunder, but his eyes spoke of peace finally found. Then Billy himself swung aboard, cleaver in one hand, revolver in the other. "Time to finish what we started in Dodge City, McCoy." The fight between them was savage, primal. Gunsmith's bullets against Billy's blade, 2 men whose hatred had festered for years finally settling accounts. They crashed through the pilot house, tumbled downstairs, each landing blows that would have killed lesser men. Sarah's shot caught Billy in the shoulder just as his cleaver opened a red smile across Gunsmith's ribs. The butcher staggered, but his answering shot caught Sarah high in the chest. She fell, her Winchester clattering across the deck. Something broke in Gunsmith then, a dam of restraint held too long. With a roar that challenged the thunder itself, he drove Billy back, matching the man's savagery with his own. Their final struggle took them to the rail, where Billy's cleaver met Gunsmith's last bullet. The butcher fell, but his hand locked onto Gunsmith's coat, pulling him over too. They hit the river together, the dark water welcoming them like old friends. Gunsmith surfaced alone, fighting current and storm to make it back to the listing Belle. He found Sarah still alive, barely, cradled in the wreckage of their shattered dreams. "I loved you," she whispered, touching his face with blooded fingers. That part was never a lie. She died in his arms as dawn broke over the Mississippi, the storm clearing to reveal a world washed clean. The River Queen had vanished with the remaining members of Billy's gang, but the law would find them eventually. Some sins can't be outrun forever. Gunsmith buried Sarah and Jake on a high bluff overlooking the river. He left his guns on their graves, twin markers for the price of redemption. The town of Redemption welcomed him back, not as a gunslinger, but as a man who had finally laid his demons to rest. Years later, folks would sometimes see him at his forge, hammering steel into plowshares instead of weapons, his eyes still the color of gunmetal, but softer now, like storm clouds after rain. And if they listened carefully on quiet nights, they might hear him humming an old river song, its melody carrying hints of love and loss, betrayal and redemption, and the eternal flow of the mighty Mississippi that had witnessed it all. If you are enjoying Adventures in the Old West channel, hit the subscribe button for future posts.